lucky to all be together today to celebrate our fellow congregant of 32 years and a remarkable trailblazer in theater. She is the artistic director of the Manhattan Theater Club, MTC, creating one of the nation's most acclaimed not-for-profit theaters. She brought MTC to the forefront of the American stage, having won every major theater award and counting, 23 Tonys, 7... That's 23 Tonys, 7 Pulitzers, 39 Drama Desk Awards, 49 Obies, and I actually had to up these. As I was writing this, I had to up these numbers because it's literally increasing by the hour, and the list goes on. She has been called a force of nature, formidable, and she is adored for empowering people, for having guts, for being tall and beautiful, and for being my stage mother, says Nathan Lane, and being there for artists, which I hold dear. I come from a Broadway theater family, and artists are key. Please help me in welcoming Lynne Meadow. And thank you for being in this space at Rodeph, where you've been.
Well, I said to Julie, I really have to start by telling you what it means to me to be at Rodeph, particularly tonight, because I have a show on 55th Street that's opening, and the New York Times is going to be there reviewing it, and I'd much rather be with you all than be watching that guy wondering what he's going to say. But apart from that, that practical detail, I have such a great affection for Rabbi Levine and for all of Rodeph Sholom and Cantor Garfein. This is a place and an institution that has meant so much to me and to our family. Our son went to school here. I think it was on this floor. I don't really quite recognize it. And he went to the day school here, and he is now about to be married, and his wife-to-be is converting to Judaism here and going to classes every Wednesday night. So what Rodeph means to me is very, very precious. And apart from Rodeph, or in addition to Rodeph, what being in a synagogue has meant to my life is very important. So I will tell you, before Julie asks me a couple of questions, that I fell in love with the theater in the basement of Temple Mishkan Israel in New Haven, Connecticut. When I was 6 years old, a room just like the Schaffler Forum, only not as nice. I was 6 years old, and my mom, who was part of the sisterhood, was very active in the theater because she was a ham bone, as we called her. Are Jews ham bones? I guess. Yes, they are. But she took me when I was 6 years old, and I stood in the back of what was the Schaffler Forum, or the basement, and I watched them rehearsing a show. I think they were doing New Faces of 1952, which was then on Broadway, and they were doing their version of it. And I watched a very tall man standing on a stage about this height, and he was it was very exciting to see him because he was about to fall over. He was doing something where he was going flat, and my eyes widened as I watched this, and I thought, this is where I want to be. And it was when I was 6, as I say, my mom was doing a number from A Tree Grows in Brooklyn in the show, so I remember it to this day. And in that space, I would go on to play Queen Esther. I also did yes, it was quite a performance. I sat in a chair and said nothing, and I think my gift for directing was apparent then. It was just as well I didn't open my mouth. But the synagogue really was the place where I discovered my love of theater. And I think this is probably true for many, many people. And when I come to synagogue here, when I hear the cantors singing, and I feel the tradition and the Jewish tradition and the number of people who are Jewish who are in the theater. I mean, I learned more Yiddish in the theater than I did growing up in New Haven, Connecticut. So it means an awful lot for me to be here and to be at an event that is sponsored by the Sisterhood. So thank you for having me.
So the cake, of course, opens March 5th, and I had the pleasure of seeing it 2 days ago. And if you need to run, not walk, and buy yourself tickets, or after this event,
Can we quote you in the?
Yeah. It's very poignant, powerful, and you should see it, as well as
Did
the
you
choir.
laugh? Did you laugh
I
too,
laughed, I
Julie, a
cried,
little
and
bit?
you tackle some major topics in the way you do so beautifully, and okay, but I'm supposed to jump right into, well, first of all, you're directing the cake. She's directing the cake. The New York Times is there tonight. It opens on the 5th. They say opening a Broadway show is like having a baby. I guess the first question, how do you do it?
I think I do it because and with the help of my passion. I mean, I think it's really that simple. When you really feel connected to what it is you're doing, I think you find sources of energy that you didn't think you had. So, saying that I had it was a gift to be able to discover my gift and to tap into it so many of us take longer to find out what it is that we're interested in, but I had a beacon. So that's, I think, what's kept me going.
And your parents were supportive, right? Going into theater?
Yes,
Yeah.
because, from the synagogue, we went on to the Jewish Community Center. So we were moved, we were successful. And my mom wrote musicals, and original musicals. And it was like waiting for Guffman. The dentist would come, and everybody would be in the shows that they wrote. And I was in the shows. And then I started criticizing. I think maybe when I was 10, my mother was in something, and she said, "What did you think?" I said, "It was ghastly. You can't do that." So I think I found my way off the stage fairly early. And after that, after the Jewish Community Center, which was a big deal, we went, Yale, when I was growing up, didn't have women. So they would use, for their undergraduate shows, they would use local women. So I was in a musical written by another congregant, Richard Maltby.
Yes.
When I was 12 years old, I was in a musical called The Grand Tour, and it was so exciting. It just was all just very, very exciting to me. I didn't even know New York existed. I thought it kind of stopped at the Yale Drama School. So
12 years old, you're in a show with your mom, and you're a student, and she's a teacher, and then something like that.
Gretchen Cryer was the teacher, and Austin Pendleton was in the show.
Fast forward, you're in the director program at Yale Grad School, and not a lot of women, as you're saying. What was that process like?
This was tricky and it's interesting, of course, that we're celebrating women's history, because I graduated from Bryn Mawr in 1968. And Bryn Mawr was just kind of a stop-off to get to the Yale Drama School. That was what I had in mind. But I applied there, assuming that I would just get in. I directed when I was in college. And I got a letter from them saying that I had been put on the waiting list. And I was horrified. I just couldn't imagine how I would not go to the Yale Drama School. So I got on the train in Philadelphia, and I asked to meet with the dean I first asked to meet with the dean, and then I got on the train. And I went up to New Haven, and I had requested this meeting, and I said, I don't understand. Why wasn't I accepted? And but I didn't understand. I thought for sure. Anyway, he said, well, it was very competitive. There were, well over 500 applicants, and we have 5 places, and that's it. Now, this was 1968, really just before the women's movement had taken off. And there were things called consciousness-raising groups that I didn't know much about because I only had eyes for the stage. But I innocently, naively said to him, well, did you accept any women? And he paused and said, well, no, as a matter of fact, we didn't. And I said, well, is that why you turned me down? And he said, well, we actually haven't had that much luck with women directors here.
Oh, boy.
I'll never forget those words. He denied that he said them, but I will never forget them. I came back to New Haven. I worked in the theater, sort of some theater that was going on there, and I wrote a very long letter, kind of an apologia, really, for why I, as a woman, could be different but equally effective as a male director. And 2 days later, I was accepted. They told me that someone had dropped out and that there was a place and that I was first on the waiting list. I don't know. All I know is that when I was there, I was the only woman director in the school. And it was I guess it was tricky, but I couldn't acknowledge it because all I wanted to do was direct shows. And I guess looking back, I realized that it was challenging, but for me, and it's probably a little bit my mentality, a challenge is an opportunity. So at the end of my first year, I actually was first in my class and was asked to go up to the Williamstown Theater to be the assistant to the man named Nikos Sakaropoulos, who was the head of the directing program, and I was his assistant at Williamstown, which I think was very formative for me. So wow. I hate to look back, but sometimes we have to look back for a minute and say, isn't it great? When I sat at the Tonys and watched and sat in back of a young woman who won the Tony Award for directing Paula Vogel's play. You saw it. And I really cheered for her. I thought, this is great. We have come a long way. We have further to go, but we definitely have come a long way.
This is actually in light of what you're talking about with women, and Rabbi Carol actually brought this to my attention. She wanted me to ask, regarding battles you have fought, was there something really challenging in the theater world for women that isn't anymore, or perhaps it still is? I know that being a pioneer means encountering many no's before giving yourself a yes, and I'm wondering, what was that for you?
What was the
those battles
no that I turned into a yes?
Yeah.
That's kind of every day. Every day. No, I mean, I have thought, and my mother used to say it because I was not a disobedient child, but she used to scream at me and say, why can't you just take no for an answer? And so it's kind of a joke around the theater. Someone will come stand in the door of my office and they say, there is no way you can do this. No way, it's impossible. We'll never be able to get the rights to that, or we'll never convince so-and-so. And they know it's just putting a red flag in front of a bull, and that I'll want to get it done. So I think not wanting to take no for an answer is, I don't know, in my DNA or something.
It works for you, Lynne.
Yeah.
Keep doing it.
Yeah.
Just another quick dive.
Well, you've met Jonathan.
Back. I was told by your assistant early on, you're finding your way in New York, and there are two job opportunities. One is at the cheese counter at Zabar's.
Yes.
And the other was, hi, Gene. My husband just made it, yay. And the other was MTC, Manhattan
Yes.
Theater Club.
Yes.
What was going on in your head during that?
I left Yale after my second year, and I'm actually still on a leave of absence to complete my third year. They asked me to be the dean several years ago, many years ago actually, and they would have given me an honorary degree, and I was tempted to kind of get the degree that way, but Ron and I decided we wanted to stay in New York. So anyway, I took a leave of absence and I went back to Paris, which is where I had spent my junior year when I was at Bryn Mawr. And so I was very influenced by living there. I loved the restaurants. I thought the theater was terrible, and I thought all the theater really was happening in the restaurants and not enough on the stage. But I had this great affection for France, and so when I came to New York, I directed a show with Henry Winkler. At St. Clement's Church. I did this show, and then I had to get a job to earn some money. I had used up all the money that I had. And I actually had gotten like this little grant to do something. So every day, I lived on 82nd Street in what we called the Barbizon West, 5 women in this apartment. And I would stop at Zabar's on my way to the subway to go work at Harper & Row, where I was working to earn my living. And every day I would stop in and I would see Murray Klein and I would say, do you have any jobs in the cheese department? Because I knew about cheese. And so he would say, no jobs yet in the cheese department. Then I would go to Harper & Row, and it was so quiet. There was never any hysteria. There was no drama. So I didn't know how long I would last there, but anyway, so I kept stopping at Zabar's, and finally, I got a play that a friend of mine from Yale had written, and the guys in the copy department at Harper and Row printed up copies for me. I went to this place called Manhattan Theater Club, and I didn't realize it. I thought I was directing a play, but I actually was producing it as well. Blah blah blah. It was this theater that had been open in 1970. And I directed this play, and then I was approached and asked if I wanted to be the artistic executive director of the theater. And I had a meeting with them, and it sounded interesting. All I knew is I wanted to direct plays. At the same time that they called me, though, Murray Klein called and said, "There's a job in the cheese department." So, what to do? So I said, I thought, well, I ought to just explore this thing with this theater. It was just kind of a mess at this place. That it was this ramshackle building on 73rd Street between 1st and 2nd, not your theater district by any means. But I had this interview with the board, and I thought, well, okay, it had artistic executive. I thought I better ask something. I said, I'd like to see your budget. Thought that would sound good. And they showed me their budget, and I said, I had no idea what these things were. I mean, I could balance my checkbook, but that was about it. And things like cartage and Con Ed, I knew what that was. But a lot of other things I had no idea. And I got to the bottom of the page, and I said, gentlemen, this is very interesting. I see you have $75,000. Why is it that you have a parenthesis around the number? I mean, those fools hired me anyway. And this fool accepted the job. So I learned what deficits were very quickly. And I learned how to raise the money to take care of them. And I learned a lot of other things. But it was, we've often wondered, Charles Bush, a playwright with whom I worked, said, imagine what Zabar's would have become if you had actually taken that job. Little shows in the upstairs in the home goods department, readings near the locks.
I'm never going to feel the same going to the cheese department. And what is your favorite cheese, Brie? From
I
France?
don't know, so many.
Yeah.
A poisse.
So there's a beautiful video on YouTube. It's celebrating your 40 years, your first 40 years at MTC, and Christine Baranski and Nathan Lane, Cynthia Nixon, David Hyde Pierce. There's a similar theme in everything they say, which is that you're very supportive of artists, and you'll say, I don't care what the critics say, I'm doing your next show. You're very much empowering them, and I think that really allows them to shine, and that's, I think, a lot of the success that you've brought. What is it? How did you do this? Why is that important to you, and how does this come out of you?
I guess, what we learn as we gain the wisdom of the years is that we often give to other people what we want ourselves. And I understand what it means as an artist who feels vulnerable, because that's where my passion is. What you need, or what I wanted, what I would have liked to receive, to have someone say, this is a process, and hang in there, and some things will be good and some things won't be good, but to have someone believe in you is, we know it, we learn it as parents. We learn, as if we've led investigated lives, which surely Rodeph has taught us to do that. That nurturing and giving to other people is the greatest source of pleasure that we can have. And so the process of supporting artists has been incredibly important to me, and a community. And again, I think there's such a connection between talking about Rodeph and the community that you feel in New York City or anywhere, in New Haven, Connecticut, when you have a community of like-minded people who share values and who express values. And I think I think the idea of being in a community was very appealing to me, which is why I stepped up to do something to become a leader in a theater, being influenced by being in a synagogue growing up, and being influenced, frankly, by growing up with Yale University downtown, because I saw. As a child, I saw a place where every September these cute guys would arrive, a whole new class of cute guys in their jeans and their no socks with their Basswegian loafers and their J-press jackets. And every year they would come, and then you'd see them go at graduation, which you're a townie walking around downtown. But I saw what it meant to have an institution that's dedicated to excellence, that people come and people go, but the institution itself represents excellence. And I feel like that's what we feel about Rodeph. We feel that there is something here where we have values and where there is a sense of excellence and a sense of community. And I have felt that in my theater, and I think it's why I've been able to stay as long as I have. I've worked there for well over 40 years, and it's never felt boring to me. And I bore easily. I couldn't make it more than 3 months in the looking at insect books at Harper and Row. I mean, that was a killer. School was a killer for me, but it's the idea of giving, which is, I think, what this is about, and what I've learned from the greatest teachers I've had, is what's made me feel that I've had a wonderful life and a wonderful career.
Processing, as my children would say. It's beautiful, Lynn. Backstage, we were chatting, and I was mentioning, the cake, and it's quite poignant. And you said something remarkable, which is that you have a dialogue going on in your head and with your friends. That's one way of thinking. And talk about needing challenges and not wanting to be bored. You said, I'm going to delve into another thought process. Can you get into a little bit about The Cake?
Yeah. Well, The Cake is a play that's written by a woman named Becca Brunstatter, who writes for This Is Us. Actually, she's just stopped writing. She's a playwright. She's from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and her parents are very conservative. And so she wrote a play. This was before all the Supreme Court stuff came out about the baker in Colorado who wouldn't bake the cake for the two gay men who were getting married. But she wrote this play about a woman who was approached by someone very close to her, her best friend's daughter, who is planning to marry a woman, and the baker is asked to bake their cake. And in this play, the attempt on the part of the playwright I felt was to try to create a portrait that would allow us to just somehow view how we deal with people who have opinions that are different from ours and beliefs that are different from ours. And I feel personally, I told the actors this on the first day, I feel completely guilty as a person who only wants to talk to people who share my liberal views. I'm not interested in hearing what people have to say if they don't believe in what I believe in. And I thought, well, doing this play maybe will help me open up. And then I go around and I say, well, we have to talk to each other. If we don't listen to each other, how are we going to get out of this mess that we're in? And what appealed to me about this play is that there's nothing saccharine about it. There's nothing with trying to create a solution. It's just showing you a portrait of people grappling with situations that put them into an uncomfortable mode. And I even had questions about doing it. I thought, why am I doing this? I said to my husband, my husband, who is a great lawyer and a great friend, and the person who listens to this kvetching and second guessing, and I said, I don't know, why am I even doing this play? Why am I going to do this? But I feel now, as the process of doing it really was very positive for me. And I think it's, so far, to the preview audiences, I think they've taken something away from it that is not trying to come up with simplistic solutions. It's just saying, take a step. And And interestingly, I went to a camp, a Jewish camp, and on Friday night we would have these services, and we would all dress up in white, and we would sing this song that I think they sing. Somebody told me they sang in church too. I didn't know, but we would sing this song called "If We All Just Lit One Little Candle." What a bright world this would be. And I said, I know this sounds ridiculous as what we're doing here, but that's kind of what I'm trying to say here, and why I signed on to do this. So, getting to do a play is such a great thing. It's just a great experience. You're so close with the people you're working with. You sometimes don't see them for years, and then you see them 10 years later, and you have this bond. So, I used to complain about it and tell Ron I'm tired. It exhausts me. Why am I doing this? And I'd worry and fret. But now I just have a good time, and it's great to be at that point in life. I really had a great time doing it, and I hope the press likes it. But if they don't, pardon my French, but F them.
Touche. Touche. So we're going to open it up to all of you. We have a few minutes to take a few questions.
Two things. One, I did see the cake last week, and I have to tell you, I am never again going to be able to eat mashed potatoes. Okay. When you say it, you'll understand. Secondly, when you were talking about the 4 guys in your class at Yale, I was kind of wondering what happened to them, and did they go on to have the kind of career that you did? And would we recognize any of those names?
No, you wouldn't recognize one. No, I'm sorry to say. No.
Knowing some people that have gone to law school and had a bad time of it because they were female. Now, what was your experiences in Yale with these 4 men? Who got the better treatment?
So as the only woman at Yale in my directing class, and actually in the school, there definitely were challenges, as I said. I think for the most part, the men in my class were very supportive of me, and I was close to them, and all the rest of the artists in the school. There was one particular professor there who really was not a nice guy. And he kind of had it in for some of the students, and he had it in for me. He knew that I was the favorite, and there was another person in the school who he was not kind to, and really questioned her talent, and gave her a very difficult time. And her name was Meryl Streep. So I felt in good company. But I think the question before that was asked about who of the men at the school would we know, I said, unfortunately, no one had the career that they really wanted to have. There was one person who ended up teaching, but who I think was not maybe the best teacher that who I've ever met. There has been a big movement that we all know about, the Me Too movement, and I thought, I thought that it was great that I was able, because I was at Yale, and there was no one there who actually could hire me to give me a job. I felt a bit immune to some of the shenanigans that went on. But then I realized having someone who doubts you can be a very dangerous thing, and particularly for young people. So I'm sure at law school. But I think, women have to step up now and stand up, and we're doing that. And we can get too carried away on both sides of the issue, frankly, in my opinion.
First I saw the cake, it was amazing, and also I loved that there was, it was during previews and there was a conversation with the crowd after, and I loved hearing so many different voices and where people take it, and it really showed that a lot of shows do go to this judgment mode, especially if they're more on the liberal side, and in this one it was judgment-free, it was just showing people as real people, so thank you for that.
Yes.
I wanted to know, what is your advice for women shaping their career in theater and those areas?
My advice to women who want to shape their career in the theater or shape their careers anywhere is, find what your passion is. And I remember many years ago I was teaching up at Yale at the time. I was teaching undergraduates, and I said, if you're a woman and you want to be a leader, you should feel comfortable being a leader. But if you're a man and you don't want to be a leader, you should feel comfortable not being a leader. I think the idea is for each one of us, and obviously women, and whose voices sometimes can be stifled more easily than guys, and yet it's easy to stifle a young man just as it is a young woman. I think we just have to try to listen to ourselves and try to find what gifts we have, what is the special gift that we have to offer the world, and follow it, and don't take no for an answer. Don't let anyone tell you you can't do something if you really want to do it. And I know that sounds simplistic. People obviously need opportunities, though, and there are some people who have a chance. I had the opportunity to go to Yale, and I had to kind of fight my way in. But one of the things that we try to do at the Manhattan Theater Club, and I know we do in this congregation, is try to find ways to help people who don't have the opportunities and give them. For example, we have an internship program that we reach out to kids who wouldn't have an opportunity necessarily to come and work in the theater, and give them the kind of support and find financial support for people who don't have an opportunity. I had an opportunity to go to a very good college. So, we also need opportunities. We can't be blithely saying everybody can get to do what they want. All of us have a responsibility to try to help in whatever way we can.
I see a lot of theater, and I just want to thank you for some really great seasons. I just saw Choir Boy. It was fantastic. Loved it. Everyone should go see it. I will see the cake.
Thank you.
And I'm just thinking of some of the things that you've done in the past. Little Foxes, I had to see it twice. See
Right,
the change of
Cynthia
leads.
and Laura.
Right? And Venus in Fur, oh my God, it's like in my top
Well,
5.
I don't think we could do Venus in Fur now. A
But
lot
then I
of
have-
S&M in that one.
It's true, but it was fantastic. And to be introduced to some incredible actors, Nita.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
It
it's
means so
amazing.
much to me that you appreciate what we do, because I'm always such a nervous wreck planning each season. And I think one of the things that I love the most is finding talent and locating talent of people who haven't been recognized. Anybody knows now that Nathan Lane is a star, but to say there's a guy who seems really talented and let's hire him. And in the case of Choir Boy, which you mentioned you saw and liked, 7 African Americans made their Broadway debut doing that show, including the playwright. And the playwright we commissioned many years ago, before he wrote Moonlight and won an Oscar for Moonlight. We had commissioned this play from him. So to me, that's the fun part, and that's the part that that's what being a not-for-profit organization. It feels to me like you need to have a mission that in some way takes risks. That's not trying to take the easiest path to do something. So finding talent has been the thing that's been the most fun and the most challenging for me.
Now, my question has to do with my regrets. I didn't see The Good People. I didn't see Jitney. So I'm wondering, do you ever film or tape productions, and are they in the archives? Are they available for consumption?
Asking about what shows that people have not had a chance to see, because, of course, we do limited runs at Manhattan Theater Club. A play by David Lindsay-Abaire called Good People that starred Frances McDormand, and she won the Tony for that. I think it's filmed at Lincoln Center Library, and you can go there and see that. Little Foxes, which was a production starring Laura Linney, and Cynthia Nixon won the Tony for that one, is also at Lincoln Center Library. So many of the shows that we have done over the years, and that all the wonderful theaters in New York have done over the years, are at Lincoln Center Library. A lot of them are in my head, and I wish I wish we had films of them. Some of that I think will be coming more and more. There's the National Theater has a program now to have National Theater Live and to film some of the theater. But what makes the theater is being there in the theater on the night. It's crazy. I mean, last night at the Cake, this show that you saw, I don't know what happened. I don't know what gremlins were there. But there was not a laugh in the place. There were a lot of tears, which is nice. But, it's nice when you laugh and cry. So the actors are very influenced by how an audience is there. And anyway, it'd be nice if we could see some of the things, but come to the theater. Really, it makes such a difference. And the thing I feel so strongly about is the power of the theater. To humanize us. It's what we feel when we come here, and we don't do it often enough on Friday nights, and we touch our humanity. That's what the theater does, because it's the art form that brings us closest to human beings and to empathizing with them and to, it's like the Greeks said, it's hard to emote, so we do it for you so you can have a good cry, even though maybe you wouldn't necessarily cry at home. So and we have an obligation to get our young people into the theater. We have a big outreach program at Manhattan Theater Club trying to bring kids in to try to make it a habit to go and see plays. My husband groaned because the question that I was asked is, how do I choose the plays? How do I find the plays? How do I make the decisions about what to do? Well, first of all, I do it with a team of people. I have an artistic staff and people who read plays, and we see everything and cover everything. I have very eclectic taste, so I have no problem doing things that are wildly different. But putting together a season of new work can be very challenging to find good quality and to find work that will be able to endure the bright lights of Broadway. Is definitely an experience that Ron has lived through with me, as I say. Oh my God, are we going to show cartoons next year, or do we have a good new play to do? So it's always a very involved process. A lot of people on the staff pitch in with me and will come and say they've seen something or seen a writer. So it's the hardest part of my job and the most rewarding part of my job and the most pressured part of my job. I could go on for hours talking about this, but you would be weeping. The question that Rabbi Levine is asking is all the criteria that factor as one is making a decision. So when one is doing planning a service here, taking into account who are the people who are going to attend, what do they want to see, what is important for them to see, maybe or hear, maybe things they don't want to hear that we feel they do have to hear. How do we get quality? How do we maintain integrity? How do we maintain diversity? How do we get to audiences that are not used to coming to the theater? There are actually so many criteria, and I think ultimately a decision has to be made from my gut about what it is that I think is worthwhile doing, taking into account all of the factors. And one of them is there are different factors for producing a show on Broadway than there are producing a show off Broadway. It's very expensive, and it's very expensive to do it. It's very expensive to maintain that theater. So we need to draw a much larger audience. If we don't draw an audience, we really lose quite a bit of money. So that means, if you know that you have Laura Linney and Cynthia Nixon in a show, you know you're probably going to be able to move enough tickets. And for us, it's not a matter of making a lot of money. It's not a matter of paying back investors. It's a matter of living to see another day. So we budget enough money to try to be able to do the next season. So the Broadway factors definitely are how many people are we going to get to come to the theater. On the other hand, every time that I have taken a risk, I took a risk on doing a play called Jitney. I had a meeting, which is August Wilson's, the only play of his that was never done on Broadway. He wrote a cycle of 10 plays, And the man who wanted to direct it came to me and said, I cannot find a star to do this. I've talked to everybody. I've been to Denzel. I've been to anybody who's a star. None of them wants to do it. I can't bring a star. And I met with him and I said, I can't do it now. I just can't do it because we had a difficult year. Our box office didn't do what we'd hoped. The next year I called him. I said, let's do Jitney. And there was a lot of concern from the people who handle the finances saying, is this really going to be able to work? And that show, as has happened with many shows, is the show that won the Tony that year for Best Revival. And the show did really well. Even doing, there are shows that one does without a star, which already puts you into a difficult position. People want to go see Bette Midler doing Hello, Dolly. That you don't have to be a genius to know that you're going to move tickets to that. The question is, are they going to come see Choir Boy, which does not have a star in it? And the fact of the matter is, we have done very well doing Choir Boy. So, I'm a believer that integrity is ultimately the thing that's going to win. On the other hand, there are things we've done where we've lost money. So I think what's interesting now is that because identity politics have become so much more exaggerated, Frank, there are many different interest groups that really want to be and need to be represented. Many playwrights from many different backgrounds that make New York what it is, and it's very exciting. So I feel the obligation for diversity. I feel the obligation to meet the standards of the box office. I feel the obligation to maintain the quality of plays. I feel the obligation to give new people a chance. I feel the obligation to bring back, to not just get rid of people who've done plays for you before because people know their names. So I'm sure, like planning your service, your head can start to spin a little bit about are we going to get enough people to be okay with this choice and know that you're going to have people who are happy and people who are unhappy, right? Whatever you do. I know.
So given the Me Too movement, do you find that it is harder to be a director to the young actors who are more sensitive to raised voices, to touching them, to put them in the right position and how do you, if you do, how do you deal with that?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
As a director,
yes.
I want to know
as a director,
actor.
Is it more difficult to work with young actors who are sensitive to
raising of voices that our generation may have not been, who are more sensitive to people touching them, to put them in a position, like a dance director, to put them in a position as a choreographer, or
right.
Or maybe you don't perceive that it's more difficult now than it was.
I definitely perceive your question being, how is it different to work with some of the younger artists than it is to work with artists who have less sensitivities, perhaps, to things that younger people might have sensitivities to? That's your question?
Yeah.
Well, I definitely have noticed that, and I noticed that, and as the director of an institution, I have to and want to be sensitive to that. So, for example, there is something now in the theater called an intimacy coach. And I directed a play a number of years ago called The Tale of the Allergist's Wife that had, that was fun. And it had Linda Lavin and Tony Roberts and Michelle Lee had a scene in which the only way to describe it was a three-way. And so I came into rehearsal. I said, okay, guys, we have to do that scene today. And I said, all right, well, why don't we try this? And then we kind of noodled around. I said, okay, Linda, you have to kiss Michelle now. And she said, okay. I said, are you okay with that? They said, okay, we're great. And then they kissed each other. And Michelle said, wow, that was great. Linda, you have really soft lips. Now there is much more sensitivity that comes from, I think, people perhaps having been abused or having boundaries that are more defined. And so in the play that I'm doing, there actually there two women kiss each other. And so I spoke to the actors. And I said, we can bring in an intimacy coach if you have any issue, because as the authority figure and the person who runs the theater, they could have been, and I explained this to them, in an awkward position to say to me, we're uncomfortable with what you're telling us to do. So we talked about it. They said, we feel comfortable. So I think we have to understand that things have changed and younger people have boundaries. And, as the artistic director of the theater, I'm very used to hugging everybody. Well, not everybody wants to be hugged. So I will say now, is it okay if I hug you? And people say, okay. And that, at first it seems, as somebody who's been hugging people for years, and, everybody in the theater sort of wants to be hugged, but that now people want to be asked. And I think if you ignore that and just say, well, this is what we do, then you're not being alive and sensitive to what concerns are. So in answer to your question, I respect actors, I respect artists. I don't want anyone working at my theater, whether it's staff or anyone, audience, anybody, to be uncomfortable if there's something that we can do about it. And we have to ask, and we have to listen, and we have to not say, oh, this is ridiculous, I gave you a little hug, if that's going to bother somebody. I'd like to hug everybody in this room when we're done, but I'd like written permission, and my husband's a lawyer.
Should I come up there? I wonder, as a theater person, do you feel somehow obligated to see all the shows on Broadway, off Broadway? I mean, what's your, how do you
well,
deal
I
with
have to
that?
get out more. I have to get out from underneath being underground in a theater and in a dark theater. So I'm awfully busy producing the number of shows that we produce, because if I'm directing them, I'm there all the time. If I'm the artistic director, I'm working with the director on the shows. So I don't get out to see as much as I want. I certainly don't get out to see as much as I did when I was starting my career, in which I saw everything. But I would like to see everything. I see a certain number of Tony shows. I'm a Tony voter. I see a certain number, but I missed more things than I wish I did miss. I absolutely, yes, but I have staff that sees everything, that covers everything. I get reports on everything, and when I have time, of course, I love to go, and when I have time, of course, I love not to go.
Well,
Husband's holiday.
Well, on behalf of our clergy team and of our sisterhood and our whole community, we want to thank you, Lynne and Molly. And just this amazing community for turning out to celebrate the wisdom and the creativity of women leaders in our community. This is really, doing a program like this in a synagogue is different, because as you noted, Lynne, in your opening remarks, you have a bond with this community that actually is connected to the place that launched you into theater. And we hope that the synagogue can be a place that launches all of us toward our passions. And that's a wonderful message for this evening. Thank you, JBS, for filming tonight. And we hope you all have a wonderful evening.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.